who felt the first effects of the storm. Throughout the area, road transport was disrupted as winds toppled lorries and spilled their loads. The Severn Bridge was closed to traffic for just the third time in its 23-year history, but not before one lorry fell victim to the storm. As well as blocking roads, fallen trees have caused thousands of pounds worth of damage. In Swindon, an 11-year-old girl died and 2 other children were in hospital after the roof of a school caved in on 2 classrooms. Several other pupils received minor injuries. The storm came across the Atlantic through Ireland. This morning, gales swept across the south of England, with the worst in Cornwall. They moved by midday across the south coast, with the storm now centred near Glasgow. This evening, it's moving out across the North Sea, with the high winds all along the eastern coast. Tonight, the worst of the storm has passed, but travel is still being disrupted. Despite the conditions, most air services managed to get off the ground, but fierce crosswinds meant many flights needed several attempts at landing.
And that report was compiled by ITN crews and news teams from ITV companies all over the country. Actor Gordon Kaye is in Charing Cross Hospital in London, where he's been undergoing brain surgery. He was driving through London when the freak gust of wind drove a chunk of wood through the windscreen. The hospital say that he's critically ill.
His injuries are, I think, best described as critical, and certainly he'll be removed from theatres to the intensive care unit for very intensive post-operative care.
Are we talking about cerebral injuries?
Yes, he's had very serious head injuries resulting from an accident which, as far as I understand, affected the front of his head.
Over the last few years, he's been a favourite with millions of television viewers for his role as the cafe owner René in the comedy series Allo Allo. Well, with me live in the studio now is ITV's weatherman Alex Hill. Alex, we know that the storm's moving north. Just how quickly?
Well, the actual centre of the storm is now out in the North Sea. That's moving rapidly towards Scandinavia, but it is leaving a sting in its tail. We've got several hours yet, particularly on the eastern side of the country, where winds once again are going to reach at least storm force, gusting probably around 90 miles an hour as far south as East Anglia through the early part of the evening. And then from about till late evening, midnight onwards, the wind steadily dying down, leaving us with a much quieter day for tomorrow.
Well, I know that it's always a complaint when we get a change in the weather, but do you think we got enough warning from the weatherman?
Well, we started warning way back on Sunday when Martin did his broadcast on Sunday evening, when he talked about a very stormy Thursday. And continually through the week, we've been mentioning storms. Last night, we were mentioning storms. And then when it gets really close to the time, the Met Office is well geared up for this sort of thing nowadays.
Alex, thank you very much indeed.
Good evening. Well, there's no doubting the main weather story tonight. The storms across the southern half of England and Wales. This is just a sample of some of the gusts we've seen during the day today. 85, right up to 110 miles per hour. Further problems further north too, across central parts of Scotland in particular. Very strong winds, drifting snow and blizzard conditions in many places. So all in all, a thoroughly atrocious and very difficult day. Now, the reason for this storm is this deep area of low pressure. It came up from the southwest through the border counties and is now out in the North Sea. So now it's the eastern side of the country getting the strongest winds. And if we take a look at that, I think you'll find that from northeast Scotland right down the eastern side of England, down into East Anglia, for the next 2 to 4 hours, that's where you're likely to see the strongest winds. And in places, once again, gusts up to 90 miles per hour, and further structural damage is still likely. By tomorrow, though, things are an awful lot quieter. Westerly winds coming in from the Atlantic, bringing a mixture of sunny periods and showers. Tonight, though, coupled with the very strong winds down that eastern side, still some rain, sleet and snow to come. Blizzard-like conditions in places, I think, particularly on the Pennines. Might even see some sleet and snow as far south as East Anglia. Through the night, though, that'll drift away, things getting colder, with a touch of frost and icy patches on the roads. And further north, holding on to that mixture of clear periods and showers. Tomorrow, well, the chart just about sums it up. The best of any dry weather down the eastern side and in the southeast, where you'll see a fair amount of sunshine and just the occasional shower. Further west, though, an awful lot of showers piling in from the west, particularly over the mountains. Those showers will be heavy, falling as sleet and snow, still a fairly stiff wind. A cold day tomorrow, temperatures generally between 5 and around 7 degrees Celsius. That's a low to mid-40s Fahrenheit, and a wind of about 30 to 35 miles an hour, just below gale force. That's it from me. I'll be back after news at 10.
Tonight, Lothian Health Board puts the blame for its cash crisis on the government. Bad weather forces the closure of almost 200 schools and wreaks havoc on the roads. And on Burns Night, we preview an alternative tribute to the Bard. Join us for Reporting Scotland at 6:30.
Blizzards have closed more than 50 schools and brought traffic chaos to Tayside and the Highlands. More than 8,000 homes have been blacked out in Perthshire, Argyll and the Inner Hebrides. Several main roads have been closed by snowstorms, drifting and floodwater. And tonight, police are warning motorists not to set out unless their journey is essential.
A foot of snow fell in Perthshire, bringing traffic to a standstill. By mid-morning, both the A9 and the M90 motorway were blocked. Motoring organisations warned all roads in the region were difficult. The AA was flooded with calls from stranded drivers. Snowplows fought in vain to keep traffic moving on the A9 just south of Perth, but some drivers were stuck for up to 2 hours. As snow turned to slush, flooding brought more problems.
The main problems are really just the quantity of wet snow and slush on the roads, which appears to be overwhelming the road department's attempts to clear it. And it has to be said, the sheer quantity of traffic still using the roads.
How have drivers been coping with the difficult conditions?
Generally well, but there is a small minority who are not using their lights and are still coming out on the roads and driving too fast.
57 schools in Tayside were forced to close, most in the Perthshire area. If the weather doesn't let up, they'll stay shut tomorrow. In the Highlands, heavy drifting snows closed 4 main roads, including the A9 Perth to Inverness route. In Grampian, snow or surface waters closed 4 routes. All roads in the region are difficult. The weather brought little joy for skiers. High winds forced many off the slopes, and the snow gates are closed at Glen Shee. Forecasters warn of severe conditions overnight with gale-force winds and freezing temperatures. Police say unless your journey is necessary, stay at home.
And with winter conditions worsening on both sides of the border, ScotRail have cancelled all overnight services from Scotland to the south.
Happened just over 2 years ago when hurricane-force winds swept over southern England. That storm cost 19 lives and destroyed 17 million trees. Today's storm, still going on, is similar.
Well, these are the average wind speeds on here. We've seen gusts way in excess of those figures, of course, something like 104 miles an hour down on the south coast, just the same as it was 2 years ago. Differences are that this covers a bigger area, but also the trees aren't in leaf, so perhaps not so much destruction from that regard.
There have been major storms before. The biggest ever storm in Britain is thought to have been in 1703, when 8,000 people died. In 1881, hurricane-force winds caused the loss of 100 ships at sea. And in 1976, 20 people died in 100-mile-an-hour winds from Manchester to the south coast. Storms are not the only extremes of weather Britain and Europe have been experiencing. The 1980s was the hottest decade, probably for centuries. And this winter has been one of the mildest. Many European skiing resorts have till recently had little snow. Elsewhere in the world, there have been weather extremes. Last autumn, Hurricane Hugo, which caused tremendous damage in the Caribbean and southern Carolina, was one of the strongest hurricanes for decades. The year before, Hurricane Gilbert broke more records. With storms causing havoc, the question is once more asked, could they be the effect of climate change? Perhaps the start of the greenhouse effect, caused mainly by the burning of fossil fuels. Certainly abnormal weather and a shift in weather patterns would be one result. But scientists say it'll be another 10 or 20 years before they could be confident that man is affecting the climate. The weather extremes could be part of the normal variability. But most scientists believe that even if the greenhouse effect's not with us yet, it soon will be, unless greenhouse gases are reduced.
Because as far ago as yesterday lunchtime, we were anticipating severe gales across the south of Britain today, and they've certainly materialised with a vengeance. Of course, it doesn't make it any easier to talk about it. In the next 6 hours, we'll find those storms gradually moderating, though. Now, on the satellite picture, we can see this massive cloud which has run across Britain today. It's now drifting across into the North Sea, the intense storms going away with it as well. That's the situation about 6 o'clock this evening. But you can see as we get a bit closer how many isobars there are in there around that low pressure. A lot of strong winds still coming down across Scotland and northern England and right the way across the south as those very tight isobars get away. Putting the wind arrows on there, you can see very strong winds indeed across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland southwards, but gradually, very gradually, during the next few hours, you will find those winds moderating, but still a full gale blowing in exposed parts of the south and the west for much of the night. And some very strong winds, incidentally, for a time, running down the North Sea. Now, it's been particularly cold up in Scotland and Northern Ireland today, some blizzard conditions for a while, been giving some
Really nasty snow there. And as the colder weather digs in now further south, it's already turning colder over northern England and North Wales. You find much of this rain turning to snow as well. So blizzard conditions moving down through northern England and perhaps into Norfolk as well as the evening wears on. So some coverings of snow there to match up with the nasty winds. Further south, a lot of heavy showers coming through, some hail and some thunderstorms as well. But things gradually getting better as the night goes along. Many more people seeing clearer weather coming through, but with a strong wind still, the chance of the odd shower getting right away through to the eastern side of England in particular. Those are the temperatures tonight. Some slippery roads to contend with over the northern half of Britain in particular. Temperatures down a few degrees below freezing in the Glens, I would think. Further south, just about enough wind to keep temperatures up a degree or two above zero. Things simplify themselves really for tomorrow. That low pressure area, the storm, way off into the south of Scandinavia. Another one just to the north of Scotland, but we've got this run of very strong winds still across the whole of the British Isles. That means to say it's going to be a cold day. It's going to be a very cold wind. Temperatures generally 5 to 7, only just into the low 40s Fahrenheit. But of course, in heavier showers, once again, those temperatures dropping quite dramatically. A lot of wintry showers down the western side of Britain, once again, hail, sleet and snow and thunder. Further east, a few showers coming through and still some heavy ones too.
They have forced the closure of almost 200 schools and caused problems for drivers in west, central, southern and northern Scotland. Many roads in Grampian and Argyll are blocked, and the motoring organisations say conditions in these areas will get worse tonight. Glasgow Weather Centre is also predicting widespread freezing temperatures across the country, leading to icy conditions on roads where the snow has melted. Peter McRae reports.
Driving conditions in many parts of Scotland this morning were described by police as atrocious. This is the M90 motorway from Edinburgh to Perth. The main road north through Perthshire, the A9, was closed and drivers were turned back at Dunblane. The southbound carriageway was only passable with extreme caution. At one stage, as conditions deteriorated, Central Scotland Police even considered closing the M80, M9 and M876 motorways. Away from the Central Belt, many roads in Argyll are closed, and the AA is warning that the situation there is getting worse. The snow gates on the A82 at Glencoe have been closed as a precaution, while in Grampian, several roads in Speyside and Deeside are blocked. The motoring organisations say they've not received any reports of irresponsible driving in the poor conditions, although some people were clearly prepared to take risks. The problems in getting about in many rural areas forced almost 200 schools to close. Worst hit were Tayside, where 54 were affected, and Lanarkshire, with 39 schools having to close their doors. Tonight, Glasgow Weather Centre says there'll be further moderate to heavy falls of snow with drifting in places. Then conditions will clear to give way to a widespread frost, leading to icy patches on roads where the snow has melted. Regional Council roads departments are gearing up to carry out gritting operations in time for tomorrow morning's rush hours. Also tonight, the North of Scotland Hydroelectric Board says because of the severe storms, more than 8,000 customers have had their supplies cut off. The worst affected areas are parts of Perthshire, Argyll and the Inner Hebrides. Meanwhile, British Rail has cancelled all services south from Scotland tonight.